Welcome to Model Engineers Laser. My name is Holly and this is part 12 of our jack build. In our last video, you may remember that we missed a little bit of work and jumped forward and did another activity just for timing with our videos. And that was regarding our lifting link and reversing arm, because we knew that that activity would take an entire video on its own. So that's what we're going to do today. Now, the instructions that you get from Roundhouse are fantastic. We keep saying that because they genuinely are, but they are designed for a left-hand driven loco, but Jack is a right-hand driven engine, so we need to adapt our reversing arm. So they come as a pair. So this one has just got one lifting arm on it, which is absolutely fine for our engine, because what we can do is just swap what side of the engine it sits on. So with our grub screw, instead of it pointing up, it will be pointing down, vice versa, when we just swap it over. So this one we don't have to do any work to. This one, we need to turn it around and put it on the other side, but as it's got the reversing arm and the lifting arm, and as you can see, one of them is bent there, we need to make sure that the reversing arm is pointing upwards. So when it turns around to put it on the other side of the engine, it's going to be pointing downwards. Now, Garden Rail magazine, this is my printout that you can get from Southern and Juffers. It's in part 3, it tells you at the top there. It explains all that you need to do. So there's 2 options that we can do. The first one is to melt the solder on here, re-bend the arm so it sits on the opposite hand, and then re-solder it back on. There's a few problems with this. First, that these are stainless steel, and to solder stainless you need a special flux for doing it, and it's a HT5 flux powder. I'm saying this as if I know what I'm doing. I've been reliably informed by Ed. So Ed gets all of his soldering stuff from CUP Alloys. At the time of filming this, you can get 50 grams of HTC flux powder for silver solder for £6.30. And you're only going to need like 2 grams of it. And in the 30 odd plus years that Ed's been silver soldering, and he's never soldered stainless, so he's never had a need to do it. He's always got around it because it doesn't come into use very often. So we're going to do the alternative method, which is laid out in these instructions. So the first thing we need to do is to cut off the reverser lever, and to make this a single one, much like the other one that we did, I showed you earlier, that we can just flip onto the side. So that's the first thing we're going to do. It's got another change of camera angle now. So the first thing to do is to take out the grub screw so it doesn't get in the way of you working. The Allen key comes in the Roundhouse kit. Of course it does, because it's a Roundhouse kit. Make sure you don't lose it, because you're going to need it later. So I'm going to put that well over there out of the way. Now we're cutting off this straight one here. Now the way, let's move your camera, so sorry if it makes you feel a bit wonky as I move. There we go. So we've just got a little vise here, and I'm going to clamp that in there. Now, this is going to be a delicate balancing act, because we want it tight enough to hold it, but not so tight that it's going to bend, because it's only a soft metal. Just put that under there. Yeah, so you don't want to bend it. So by taking the grub screw out, I can get my saw blade in there quite nice and neatly. I'm not going to catch on the side of the vise, and I can take that out quite neatly. And the bent arm that I need to keep, I've just tucked under there. If I can move the cameras like that's better, you can see there. There you go, let it focus. You can see that's tucked out there under the way, so I'm not going to catch that with the saw blade. So this is the one that I need to take off here. Right, so just got myself a little blade, and like I said, it's only in there ever so lightly because I don't want it to bend that at all under the strength of the vice. So I'm just going to gently take it off. I'm going to pause this video because it's going to be a really long video of me sawing. You don't need to watch me saw. There we go. I finished sawing it off. It only took me a couple of minutes, but I don't think anybody would want to sit there watching me saw a bit of metal off for 2 minutes. It's quite self-explanatory once I've got myself started. So as you can see, that's quite an untidy edge there. I'm just going to turn the camera around so you don't hit the vice in it and help with your focus. It's just a bit unsightly. We've already discussed that I'm a bit of a perfectionist. So I'm now just going to take a file and just neaten that edge up there. I might put it back in the vice actually to do that. Just said having turned the camera around. Again, you have to remember not to put these too tight in these vices because it's going to bend and misshapen everything. So I'm just going to file this down and pause it because, like I said earlier, like the sawing bit of the video, it's going to be a bit boring for you to watch me file something. And there we have it. I've just filed that down. It's gone all weird with the focus again. There we go. You can see I filed that down there, so it's nice. Taking off any rough edges that's going to catch and cause problems later. Now we're on to the next section. So we've now changed the design of our reach rod to include a laser cut reversing arm, and we've just tabbed it onto it there. So that means we can silver solder it as a replacement on and not have to use the special solder because we could just use the normal silver solder that we use for everything else. So the next stage is to take this off of here, and it's going to slide onto the end there. Now, as with laser cutting, you can see it's quite, that's perfect focus. It doesn't quite go on. So with laser cutting, you get the tiniest of burrs. They're not completely finished all the time. So I've just got a little round file. I'm going to start by taking that burr off the inside of there because that is probably all that is stopping it from sliding on so neatly. So try that one now. Oh, it does go a little bit better. It still needs a little bit more. I've deliberately left it tabbed onto there for now just because it gives me something else to hold on to. Does need a smidgen more all the way around. I've cut that section of that video down a little bit because you were just seeing me file for quite a bit of time. Not overly, but just when you're trying to make a video that's easy for people to follow. So I've just finished filing round the circular end of that, and you're only filing it to enough that it'll slide on there up to the edge of that collar. We're not planning on going over that collar. Don't worry about that 1/4 of an inch there. We'll explain what we're doing with that later. I've also taken it off the lever and I've just filed the edges down with a small flat file to get rid of any burrs that are there. And now we're on to soldering. We've got a bit of tag team going on now, just because of trying to do things, explaining what's happening, filming and doing it is proving a bit difficult with the more complicated bits. So I've got a tag team of Ed, so you'll see Ed's hands come into shot now and again. Soldering. So the things you need to be aware with your soldering, we've got our flux, which we mentioned earlier. We get our flux from cup alloys for everything. You need to be careful not to get the flux on the hole where the grub screw goes in, because anywhere there is flux, the solder will go, and that's going to mess up putting our grub screw in later. And the other thing to note is, Ed, can you just pass the plumber's blowtorch? So I have the plumber's blowtorch here for us to put the solder in. It's the same gas that we use to actually run the engine, so we can double up and use it as a bit of both, especially when pressure runs low in one, it'll work for the other. So yeah, first thing to do is to put the flux on. I'm just gonna mess around with the camera and do this and zoom in, which is why I'm doing that. So as I said, it's just about being careful not getting it where the grub screw would be. There we go. Let's just checking it.
Right-hand side.
Yeah, right way around, please. As you can see, the flux squashes out as you squash it up against the collar, which is fine. Just make sure there's none in that hole. Now, we had a play with this earlier about resting it up against the back of where we're soldering, just to make sure we can get it as close to a 90-degree angle as possible. I'm just going to zoom in there. Might have zoomed in too much, so I'm going to zoom out, and I'm going to reposition the camera, so bear with me. There we go, that's a better position to see in for you guys. So as you see, we've propped the one at the back as a guide. It has to be a visual 90 degrees. It's not a precision. The scale that we're working at, it really doesn't need to be that, but it's just to give us a bit of support as we put the blowtorch on it. So you want to make sure that the metal gets nice and hot before you try and put the solder in, because otherwise it's not going to go anywhere. Solder's not going to melt and bleed through properly. There we go, just need to let it cool. Nice and easy, quick job there. So that's cooled down enough now for me to handle it. And if we look around the joint, you can see there where we put the solder in, it looks like it's sealed quite nicely, but not necessarily at the back there. The flux will have done its job and had sent that solder round, and you would have seen we only used a small amount. You don't need to throw loads of solder at it like some people do. It's not necessary. You're not doing a boiler fitting, you're not soldering up the bottom of a boat. It doesn't need to be waterproof, it needs to hold it. But we're not going to know how well that has soldered to that until we put it in an acid bath. So we're going to just make up a small acid bath in, got an empty butter pot and some citric acid. You may have difficulty getting citric acid. I know we get ours just as a little pot from Wilkinson's, but it's not on the shelves. You do have to go and ask them for it. Various reasons why they don't put it on the shelves. So if you can't find it, do ask. You can get it from there. I know some people say you used to get it from the chemist, but I don't think you can anymore. I know when I asked for this lot out of Wilkinson's, they asked what it was for. And I think that was to find out whether you wanted it for brewery making or cleaning. And I said, told them it's for cleaning loco bits, so that's the box they produced me with, but you don't need a lot. So that's going to go into a little bath overnight, and I will stop this video here, but I'll come back to it shortly, so it'll look like a smooth transition for you, and that's going to soak overnight, and we'll show you what it looks like in the morning. We're back this morning having had that soaking overnight, and you'll see it's cleaned up quite nicely with a bit of Scotch-Brite as well. It's not a perfect fit. The solder has gone all the way around for the best part, and the whole point of it is that is not going anywhere. So now to fit them to our frames. So now we've come to fit them, we have noticed a bit of a flaw. We've already done this one as a trial run so I can get my words right and how to explain how to put this together. So I'm just going to turn it a bit. Hopefully you can see that quite nicely. Now, when we fit these onto here, you can see the expansion links in the way. So what we're going to have to do is undo this pin first. Make sure you don't lose your washer and your pin, and then that will drop down to enable you just to spin the expansion link out the way to slide that on there free of your clearance. So this is the bit we need to be careful with. So I'm just going to zoom in and adjust the camera. Now, because we've swapped these over, the grub screws are going to naturally hang down, and it's going to be difficult to get the Allen key in. So the way to do this is just slightly spin that forward out the way. We've put that one on already with the grub screw facing down, and this, there's the dog's barking, facing forward on our engine. So now, having spun it, it's pointing upwards. What we need to do with this side is to make sure that this bent rod, the one that's nearest to us, its original one, is as in line as possible with this one, because you're going to end up with one in gear and one not in gear if they're not in line. So this rod that we've added on will be pointing towards the back. The grub screw should be pointing towards the front, and this one, they should both be pointing upwards. I'm just using by eye that they're in line. Dropping the Allen key. There we go. And that looks quite right to me. And then when we bend that back, this should be in the right place. And then we need to put this back together. So we start by putting our expansion link back in place, lifting the end up, putting the pin back in, and then the washer. And then dropping everything, having to start again. And there we have it, all back together, and these are on and can file it. I think if I were writing these instructions and do it again, I'd probably put these on earlier just to save that bit of faff. It's not the end of the world, it's not difficult to undo, but I think I would have been happy doing it the other way around. We'll call it there for this video. I did say that that was quite a lengthy video to have tagged on to the end of the last one, which is why I wanted to do it on its own. Thank you very much for joining us. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe to our page, and we'll see you on our next video. Thank you.